All right, take it away, my friend.
Good morning, Mr. Goodman, and welcome to another life-affirming live stream from Tyru Studios. Today we're going to help you comb your aura, open your third eye, and realign your chakras with universal vibrations at 432 hertz. I'm your facilitator, Linus Yume Cowan, and I'd like to begin with some positive affirmations. Stand before a mirror or face the rising sun and repeat after me. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, no one can tell how flat you're playing. And now I'll turn it over to our host, Sean Tyru Head.
Well, how do you go after that? I mean, wow, that was special.
Yeah, I thought that you could use your aura being combed. Or do you comb your aura, or do you just like shake it out?
Yeah, I think I take it out and smash it against the wall a little bit.
Yeah, just gonna hang it up on the clothesline and beat it.
Yeah,
with a stick.
Honestly, that's really the best way to solve it.
Yeah. No, I had to go there because I don't know what I've done to anger the internet gods, but every time I get on YouTube, I get several videos telling me how 432 hertz is the answer, and 440 was created by the Nazis in an attempt to sow unrest. And I don't know what I've done to upset the algorithm, but that keeps coming up in my feed. So
yeah, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
It's a very popular conspiracy theory that the Nazis were the ones who decided upon 440. And that's not the history that I heard of the 440 standard, but whatever. Anyway,
Yeah,
the universe vibrates at 432 hertz, Sean. Everyone knows that.
Actually, it hums at B flat, so they're wrong in general.
Right. So it's Daiwagaku, but a little. I'm not Banshiki. It's Banshiki, but a little flat.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Look, there was actually a council in the late 30s about the standardization of pitch, and you can actually go to it's the International Conference at London, and by the British Standards Institutes, and they have there's a paper that you can read from the article, and it's from 1939, and they talk about creating a standard pitch amongst 5 countries, which were France, Germany, UK, Holland, Italy. So those
That's kind of.
So there you go. It's 440 was 1939 by the British Institute.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where the Nazi thing got started.
Like, I think it's just one of those things that, like, as soon as you go, like, look, Hitler's actually still living in a cave in Argentina, everybody goes, yeah, I believe that. You know, you'd have to be like 135, but I believe it.
Yeah. So we have some comment that says, I'm good enough to be flat and sharp all the time. Well done, sir.
Well done. Yeah, actually, there's gut strings instruments are better off at lower tensions. So actually, I'll say that that's not true. I used to play gut strings on my viola, and they are a pain in the butt. So what happens is they only last for about a month, by the way. So gut strings for the first week won't stay in tune, and then for 2 weeks you just get this gorgeous, beautiful sound. Then the last week they die and it sounds like a moose. But but like I'm telling you, those two weeks of playing on gut strings is absolutely worth it. But the first week you're constantly retuning.
Yeah.
Because it has to build the tension. Yeah.
On the ukulele, you play with a lot of people play on nylon strings, and nylon strings again won't stay in tune for the first week. And there's also a kind of a thing in the ukulele world of if you have an instrument that you don't like the way it sounds, or it doesn't project, it doesn't have the sort of brightness that you're looking for. We play at the 440 standard, but just tune the instrument up an entire step.
Ah, I see.
So, and I have one instrument in my collection that I still keep one whole step up because it just doesn't. It's a T plate with steel strings, and it just doesn't sound good at um, the normal ukulele tuning.
Mm-hmm.
The GCEA, and so I tune it up a whole step, which is great until you're on stage and you have to like think about all the chords and transpose them all in your head.
Yeah, that won't work.
So you're standing on stage going, wait, that's an E. No, yeah. So
All
it's
right.
always exciting.
So as always, we are here to talk about shakuhachi and answer your questions on techniques, pieces, basically anything that you have on Japanese culture, Japanese music, even sometimes Japanese language. So feel free to write those comments in the description. We also have a join button right below the video. So if you want to take private lessons but don't want to pay the private lesson fee, you can hit that join button and get access to hundreds of videos to thwart your shakuhachi career. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't liked this video yet, hit that like button. It doesn't bite back, I promise. Linus, so what's our first topic today for shakuhachi?
Well, first we should talk about the fact that you are back in Japan.
Back in Japan.
Yeah, and the backdrop. We're back in the studio.
Yes.
Back with all the beautiful stuff. So while you were gone, I came over and aired out the studio a couple times,
Mhm.
and oh god, the word just evaporated from my brain.
Well, I noticed that my pet mouse is gone.
Yeah, he was like roughing me up, like he was trying to get me to give him money.
He was like that. So is he gone?
Yeah.
Like, is he dead? Just tell me.
I don't know.
Ugh.
I haven't seen him.
Oh.
I think he left when you stopped being there because there weren't any sandwiches or anything laying around. So
Oh, Harold, you shall be missed.
The what, I cannot remember the word. I'm blanking on it. The komiso.
The tengai.
Tengai, that's it. I tried the tengai on while you were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with my beard, it's really not much of a disguise.
So next time you come over for the live
Like,
stream,
really,
we'll have you wear the tengai, and we'll kind of give you a rating of what's the disguise level here.
yeah, it's really obviously me. When there's like 8 inches of white beard hanging out of the bottom of the tengai, it's not much of a disguise. So anyway,
Yep.
You had sort of an extended stay in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and you traveled with your flutes. So how did that go? Did TSA think you were, smuggling something illegal?
Well, on the way there, so usually when I take all of my flutes, I put all of them in a hard shell case, so they get submitted, or they get put checked not at the gate, but at the counter. And then usually I take one shakuhachi with me through TSA and carry on. That's my main shakuhachi that I use all the time. That always gets taken out, and then they stare at it for a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, can I have like a lesson right now? Like, if I didn't have a flight that I had to get to." But but yeah, that usually does happen. I usually get stopped, and because we have the little pups with us too, we have water and milk that we take on with us, and so we always get stopped for every single liquid that we try to cross through on the border.
Traveling with children is just tough.
Yeah, especially under 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just rough. So were they good? Were the kids good?
The way there, they were actually very, very good. On the way back, it was a little bit of a different story.
See, I think that the motion sickness medications, the primary side effect of those things is drowsiness, and that's not a mistake, right? That's on purpose.
Yeah, they do that on purpose for sure.
Or same with cough medicine. You're like, I don't know, terrible cough, a little bit of Robitussin, and then the kid sleeps for the 12 hours of the flight.
All right, we have our first question coming in here. So first from Debile Snail, love from New York, love back from Japan. Joe Stat, can you briefly explain what to practice to increase volume and dynamics? So yeah, this is a great question, and there's a couple things that I would say. First is that it also depends on the type of flute that you're playing on. So if you're going to play on a jinashi flute, you should know that you're not going to have as much of a wide dynamic range as you would on a giadi. Second thing is that the thinner your flute is, typically the quieter it's going to be, and you're again not going to have as much dynamic range. So if you have a flute that is thicker, that has maybe even a slightly wider bore, you're going to have a lot more dynamic range. So that's the first thing. So sometimes if you're practicing and you're like, I just can't get any louder, there might be a wall that you're hitting with the flute. So the flute has a limitation that it's not going to get past, and there's no way to go past that point. As far as getting just a couple tips, it's actually kind of surprising that it has nothing to do with pushing harder necessarily or learning how do I get more air. That's usually never the concern. Typically, when people try to play louder, they start to push the flute into their face, or they start gripping the flute tightly, and those two things are actually what decreases your volume and your dynamics. So when you play loud, you actually want to soften the grip on the flute, and then you can blow more air and you'll get more sound out of it. So practice trying to play louder with a softer grip and with less pressure into the face, and you should get a result there.
Yeah, every just like everything with shakuhachi, there's this dichotomy of the more relaxed you can be, the more awesome and intense your playing can become, and it's very frustrating when you're trying to get those bigger sounds. To You kind of have to let go and let it happen.
Yeah.
And it's the same with playing fast. Playing fast causes a lot of tension in the hands, and the more relaxed you can be, the faster you're going to be.
Yeah.
It's very much it's one of those beautiful yin yang things about the shakuhachi.
Yeah. And so even like if I just play the row here, if I push that into the face, you can hear how like the sound already becomes destabilized, and that there's a lot of volume that gets lost. But then as soon as I can relax the flute, setting it gently on the face, then there's all that sound. And it's effortless. I don't have to try very hard to get that sound out of the instrument either. So
there's also some sleight of hand that can be done. If you want the big row at the end of the piece to sound massive, then playing beforehand should be restrained.
Yeah.
If you keep your basic volume in restraint, then when it's time to go big, whatever you come up with will seem bigger by contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mega says here, one of the difficulties I have now is starting a note with a slide up to a pitch. Any additional tips on besides pushing through it and practicing dips across the full scale? Yeah, so basically what he's talking about is like nyashis that start the line. So let's say, for example, like the opening of tamuke. Something like that. This is actually another area where the previous commenter's question is the same answer. A lot of times when people go from that starting in position, when they come here, they inadvertently push the flute in at the same time. And so he also further comments that, especially in the con register, Otsu is usually fine. Well, in con, it's even that problem is actually exacerbated because when you push the flute to the face, it actually makes it easier to play con. Like, so if I just push the flute in, the utaguchi comes closer to the lips, therefore closing the hole more, therefore giving us the con register, right? It will push the octave up right away. So, but the thing is, if you push in to play con, and then you try to go down, the note's going to be gone because there's no more space for the airflow to actually hit the utaguchi. So most likely in this case, it's also the exact same issue of pushing the flute into the face. So the previous question, though different, is the same answer for the following question.
Yeah, it's that sliding up to pitch is a thing that a lot of vocalists have a hard time with too. And
Mm-hmm.
oddly enough, the answer is the same. You have to relax and not try to slam into the pitch that you're reaching for.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this happens going the other way too, like Sudiage. People doing Sudiage, and like hit
Oh
that pitch
yeah, yeah,
really.
yeah. So I'll talk about that briefly before we get to Dat Guitar's that question there. And
Yes.
the that it's a little bit of one of my pet peeves is that after a Sudiage effect, you get that big hit, and I always found it to be just very unclassy and not very elegant. So that's it. It's just me wanting to complain about that. So
All
that's
right.
it. Just want to say it's
So
unclassy and I don't like it. All right.
yeah. So Dat Guitar says, when did the Shakuhachi follow the 440 standard, and was there ever a pitch standard in old Japan before 440?
Um, so yes, there was a pitch standard, and it basically had to do with the way that the Chinese musical standard was tuning, and that particular tuning that came over to Japan at that time. This is definitely a Laron question, but I'll just kind of give you what I know on this. So, basically, every time there was a new emperor, they in China they did a tuning system. They redid the entire tuning system in order to create balance between the celestial world and the human world. So the tuning system was always changing, and so A wasn't always the same under every single emperor, and so whatever system was at that time in the Tang Dynasty that moved over through Korea, through the Korean Peninsula down into Japan, that kind of stuck. So the A that was particularly used was about a quarter tone flat versus the modern like A pitch that we think of, which is at 440. But as far as shakuhachi goes, there was no absolute standard for the playing. Even in hito yogiri, like yes, it's like a ishaku hachibun. Ishaku hachibun was the size, but because there was still length differentiation among those flutes, they weren't all perfectly 33.3 centimeters in length. They ranged a little bit, and so the A pitch or their low pitch also did fluctuate as well too. So it wasn't always the same. Same thing with shakuhachis is that you do get some that are they have like an E flat playing pitch. Sometimes they're E flat quarter tone flat. Sometimes they're E flat a little bit sharp. Sometimes they're D. Sometimes they're C quarter tone sharp. And I mean it goes all over the map. So I wouldn't say there is actually a standard that they were looking for, because you have to remember that the shakuhachi is not an ensemble instrument in its time. It's a solo instrument. You're playing by yourself. There's only a few pieces that are duets in a sense, but they're really kakei, right? They're call and response that you're kind of playing against each other. You're not playing together necessarily. So,
Well,
oh,
and also the shaku measurement varied over time because there were different kinds of shaku. Because there was a shaku for carpentry, and there was a shaku for cloth, and
mhm.
there was a shaku for like measuring the growth of a plant, and so they were slightly different. So even saying, oh, it's ishaku, whatever the
Yeah,
measurement
and
is not precise.
there's also a shaku for military purposes in like bujutsu, and it's the distance from your wrist to your elbow, and then a tsun is the first digit of your index finger. So like when they would make bowl, and you were going to make a three shaku bowl, it was three of your arm lengths, and so since everybody has different forearm length, everybody has these san shaku bowls, but they're all different sizes.
This reminds me very much of a drill instructor that I knew who was famous for saying, there are three ways. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the military way. Guess which one we're going to do?
Yep,
So,
that sounds about right.
yeah. It's interesting, too, to think about the whole idea of a pitch standard is something that is so difficult to pass from person to person in a time prior to like precise machining,
Hmm.
precise tuning forks, for example. were something that's very much a last couple centuries kind of thing. Like you
Hmm.
couldn't really make precise tuning forks until, I don't know, probably the 18th century at least.
We didn't even have precise metronomes until the 19th century.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, I mean, this goes into a whole big rabbit hole of like how did clocks stay on time and things like that.
Yeah.
It's very
Well,
complicated. That
water
industrial
clocks.
revolution was not an on-off thing.
Yeah.
you know?
Water clocks were pretty good.
Yeah, and we were talking the other day about daylight savings time. I wanted to include some information about how the Romans had the water clocks, and they reset their water clocks for certain times of the year. But of course, unforeseen circumstances made it such that I could not be there to be pedantic about daylight savings time in person. So
Yeah.
I had to let you handle it. I didn't want to waste all of your time reading my notes.
But I
So
think in another case too, like, no, I won't go too much into that. But there are some times where like even the way that we play certain effects and sounds on the Shakuhachi now, like, are not how they would have done it back in the day. So, like, for example, there's a line in Honshirabe Joshi where we play that, like, that little bit there. That's not how it
mm,
was actually played originally. Originally it was, and then like that. So they used a very
huh.
different pitch system than even that we're using today. So sometimes when people say, "Well, what pitch should I be playing on this one to be authentic?" Well, to even be authentic in this piece, you have to change everything. You got to change the instrument, you've got to change the tuning system, you got to change the scales that you're playing, because they actually didn't do that in the oldest iterations of the music. They did something else. And so the miyakobushi, the kind of the popular modern way that we play, is relatively new.
Yeah, and also we're just dealing with the fact that as 21st century Western players, our ears just aren't accustomed to the different scale, and this is a problem that people who play instruments from other cultures. I mean, I have a friend who plays the oud,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's very hard for him to learn the scale the way the oud wants it to be because it feels wrong to those of us who grew up listening to the even temperament or the piano scales.
Hmm. Well, even in the miyakobushi scale, which is the primary scale that we use in all of our honkyoku music, like the like those, the A flats and the E flats are quarter tones. They're very low.
Yeah,
And so when I have professional musicians who come to learn shakuhachi with me, they always play those A flats and those E flats as A flats and E flats rather than the quarter tone flat. And for them, it's a very hard adjustment to make, to really get those oohs very, very low, and the tsumeris as well, very, very low.
sure. And I wonder too sometimes how this is one of those questions. It's a shower thought. You know, like does any of this actually sound like it did in the 1700s or the
Yeah,
1600s?
that's a really good question. I think the closest that we could probably get to, honestly, if you want to hear what it probably sounded like in 1700, just go listen to Nick play. I think that that's probably
Yeah,
about what it sounded like.
yeah. I mean, we definitely have, we have the influence of Western instruments and Western temperament in our scales. We also have the influence of kind of the newer style of shakuhachi,
Hmm.
the instruments themselves. Nick, I think the way Nick plays is so very different from the way we play, and
Yep.
trying to play on, for example, the 1.9s that we were using at the festival last year. Uh, it's a very different animal. Everything from the angle of attack to just even how they respond to going up going from Otsu to Kan was very, very different from the flutes I normally play.
Yeah, and
Almost enough to call it a different instrument.
Yeah, and also this is another thing to consider too, is that regionally speaking, people play differently. So even if you say like, oh, this is how somebody might have played here, let's say, well, which part of Japan? Like, oh, are you saying like this is how people played in Kyoto? Because the Kyoto instruments were very different than, like, let's say the northern instruments. So northern Oshu flutes, for example, or Kimpu flutes tended to be thicker and wide bore. Not that all of them were, but and then Kyoto flutes tended to be thin bore and shorter flutes and so on, and they were a lot more, like, I suppose, elegant. But again, not all. But when I picked up in a couple Edo flutes that were from Kyoto, they were all thin bore and tended to be like 1.6, 1.7 in length. Then up in the Oshu region, you get things that are more, wider and thicker bamboo, 1.8, 1.9, 2.0, that kind of stuff.
This is similar in a lot of ways to the kind of folk music debates in the United States, like the clawhammer banjo, and that the banjos that are, I mean, there are fretless banjos, and how the fretless banjo was kind of like the precursor, I guess, to the banjo we have today, and that's a rabbit hole that you can like be lost in for days.
Oh yeah. But the most important thing is that you enjoy what you are playing. This is the most important thing. If you like what you're playing, as my one of my composition teachers used to say, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
Oh, that's so bad.
It's bad. I know. It's bad. It's bad.
That's why I brought up the chime. I thought you were going to get all holistic for a second there.
No. Maybe I should bring my bell over and every once in a while when we have a very a no Zen talent moment.
Well, I think that the reason that I kind of went that route is because there is a area of the shakuhachi world that's very much interested in vibrational effects and the effect of low tones on the heart center and all that kind of stuff, and it's an interesting sort of side of the shakuhachi that I freely confess I haven't spent a lot of time delving into, because I do my robukis, but I don't want that to be my life.
So I actually, we were just kind of talking about like the Menkyo systems and where does like the money go for that? Like what do we use in the studio? And this is a perfect transition to talk about that. So the money that comes in through like YouTube and the money that comes in from the students, a lot of it gets reinvested into our community. So one of the things that we are doing next is I actually am having a medical research scientist write an article for our page on the benefits of breathing and what are the actual like chemical processes that are happening that gives you physical benefits from doing breath and playing shakuhachi. And so that's
cool.
And that's the kind of stuff that we're doing. So I'm very much looking forward to that article. He said, I told him that I gave him a max of 2,000 words, so we'll see if he follows to that. He's a very quiet guy in general, so maybe he can just say, benefits are much. Here are the benefits. Article end.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that particular article and so on. But I haven't seen, like, I think you can get away with talking about there's an actual physical effect on something like binaural beats.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily see a benefit from, at least I've never read anything that wasn't pseudoscience on how waves and sound affect somebody in terms of like actually having physical healing manifestations.
Yeah, I've heard people make the claim, for example, that the purring of cats is the reason that they purr. One of the reasons that they purr is that it's a self-soothing, self-healing vibration that they're creating. And I'm like, cool story, bro. Citation needed. I really struggle with that kind of stuff. I'm a bit too much of a materialist I think that we know, for example, that vibration can shatter glass, right? But the volume at which that vibration has to be produced and the nearness to the emanation of the sound is such that I have a hard time imagining that vibrations from your shakuhachi are loud enough to really do something to you on a cellular level.
Yeah.
They definitely do something for your soul, but I don't know about in a material sense.
Yeah.
So how much of the Menkyo money do you spend on exorcisms and oral cleansing?
God, at least like half of it.
No offense to our new age friends. I'm just having fun with the concept.
Yeah.
I love the idea of coming to the studio for a lesson, and when I walk in, you've got like a smudge stick in one hand and like a dead chicken in the other.
And then like there's a pentagram on the ground, and I have sage. Like.
Right, and you've got candles at the 5 points. Like, shh, be quiet. You'll upset the spirits. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like yeah, if it works for you, great. But like I don't know. I like the sound of shakuhachi, and that's what I'm into. The tone of it, the actual music itself, the scales, and I like the breathing of it. Right, the breathing is really fun.
Yeah, actually, I played the other day at the little shrine near our house, and I just played a couple pieces, and there was my kid, like, we got a recording of it, but it's really terrible, because my kids and our neighbors' kids were, like, playing in the yard in front of the shrine, so, I'm playing shakuhachi, and it's very nice and peaceful, and there are children chasing each other around, screaming in the background, which... If you know anything about my life, that's how my shakuhachi playing always sounds. There's always a child screaming in the background. But my neighbor, who is from Sri Lanka and grew up Buddhist and whatnot, he just said really nicely. I said he recorded it, and I said that doesn't sound too bad, and he because again they're Sri Lankan and it's sort of part of their culture. It's a very unaffected answer. He said, yeah, that's a very soul-healing sound.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't think it was that good, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think that there's like truth to that in terms of like in the immaterial sense, right? Because their music has a very very, I mean, Schopenhauer talks about this in his book on the will. Especially he has a lengthy section on music and talks about how music is one of the greatest art forms because it can accurately basically transcribe what the soul wants to say and then syntactically deliver that to another person at the highest level. With that in mind, I mean, the music speaks to us in such a way that we can't actually give it words. And there's a huge emotional effect that it happens, and for that there's a huge amount of healing that can happen. And I think that psychologically, music therapy, it becomes one of the greatest resources for people who suffer from a variety of mental illnesses as well as physical illnesses too.
Yeah, the whole idea of musical therapy is something that I every time it comes up, I go, I should look into that, and then I forget and don't do any reading on it. But it's something that I've always kind of wanted to delve into. Correct me if I'm wrong. Nick Belando's wife is a music therapist, right?
Correct. Yep.
Interesting. That could be an interesting thing to have on the live stream at some point too.
Absolutely. I have a lot of music therapy friends who have been doing it for 15, 20 years, and I think I'll give them a call and have them on the podcast with us to go over that. So if you're interested in having a music therapist come on and talk about the benefits of music therapy, kind of give us a thumbs up in the chat or say that sounds like a great idea. If you have other ideas for guests or something that you would like us to talk with, like I'm sure we can get like a Russian metaphysicist to come on and tell us about stuff. That'd be kind of interesting.
That'd be cool.
I know one. So,
yeah.
And then, of course, we also have the like button, the subscribe button. So if you haven't smashed those buttons, make sure you smash those buttons for us. And then if you're interested in learning Shakuhachi, hit the join button and get onto our membership. There's hundreds of videos teaching you how to play Shakuhachi.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the benefit of of your YouTube membership cannot be overstated. I've talked to so many people on our Discord who are not, for various reasons, not able to take lessons, private lessons with an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And those videos are kind of life's blood for those people. And some of them are, you listen to them play, they're turning out to be great players. I think you definitely can get to a certain level with dedication and review of those videos.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
Oh, we lost him for a second.
Are we?
I think you're back now. I think it was just for a brief moment.
Okay, you mentioned the idea of music being able to speak to people on a certain level, and it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy said, "Music is the shorthand of emotion."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's something that I mean, I guess because I'm a musician, and when you think about therapy, I'd much rather have musical therapy than lay on a couch and have to talk about my mom.
And how does that make you feel?
Exactly. How does that make you feel? That makes me feel like this is why I joined a punk band when I was 16.
And how does that make you? I love those sort of those. I'm watching this TV show right now called Resident Alien, and so for anybody who has access to Netflix in America, you should definitely watch Resident Alien. It's absolutely hilarious. The basic premise is that there's a guy who from outer space comes down to Earth. He's supposed to destroy Earth, but when he lands there, he ends up running into a doctor. He kills the doctor and assumes his body, and then he gets basically called in to become the small town doctor in Colorado, and so he has to start treating patients. And part of his thing as well is he has to be the town psychiatrist as well because he's multi-board certified, it turns out. And so in one of the scenes, he's like talking to the mayor about his marital issues, and he goes, "And how does that make you feel?" And then at one point he's like, "You're not even listening to me. And how does that make? I am too listening to you."
Yeah. There's a classic episode of Parks and Rec where Nick Offerman's character is just responding to every single question put to him with a question, and the interviewer finally says, "Do you plan to answer everything I ask you with a question?" And he looks at him and says, "Do I?" Yeah, it's deeply frustrating when you hear therapists do that, and I get why they're trying to get you to talk, but as an ESL instructor, it's the same thing. I'm always with my English students saying, and tell me about that. You can just kids roll their eyes. They're like, "I've used up all my vocabulary, teacher."
Yep. It's so Christian here. He's obviously watching the show. He says Alan Tudyk is fantastic. My favorite thing about the series, right? Just to talk about this for a second, is the aliens laugh, and there is no way that I can get through. I can even make it because it is so cringy and just perfect. Like Alan has this way of. Basically, it's not like the traditional alien kind of way of that you would think it would be. It's so good. Like it's like this is exactly what an alien from outer space would kind of be like. And another way of thinking of it is, different cultures have let's say for someone from like Thailand, they've never been to any other country in the world, but they learn English and they come to America, and their mannerisms are going to be so different that we're going to see like that's kind of awkward in English, or they'll translate something from the Thai language and directly say it in English, and we wouldn't say that, but that's exactly what Alan's doing in it, and along with the laugh that's like that, it's just utterly brilliant. So the whole thing is incredible, and I love the laugh. I love it. So y'all should really watch that show. It's fantastic.
If this is your first exposure to Alan Tudyk, you're in for a treat. He is absolutely one of my favorite actors. He's so funny, and he also has had kind of an interesting career. He if you're not a fan of Firefly, what is wrong with you? Go watch Firefly.
Hmm.
He is most beloved character on the show, I think,
Hmm.
and absolutely worth watching. And he's also just shows up in weird places, like in he was the voice of Stunny the robot in I, Robot. Just stuff like that. He's had a very interesting career. Absolutely hilarious guy, though.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I see that he's also in Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. That's pretty amazing.
Yes, yes, and he's kind of I've seen him talk a little bit in interviews about how uh, this is not the career he intended, and that falling into the sci-fi fantasy, that kind of world sometimes typecasts an actor, and he said he's actually very, very happy that happened to him. Like he
Mm.
loves that fandom. He's really happy being with the sci-fi nerds.
Mm. Yeah. He's also in
All
Moana
right.
too. But anyways, let's go to more Shakuhachi questions and back to Shakuhachi things. Maybe we can get Alan to try playing Shakuhachi.
Hey, there we go. Fact: Tudyk collects yardsticks.
That's something
What?
I would expect of the alien on the show, not of him himself.
Yeah, he's really cool. He's one of those people I would I've been to a lot of sci-fi conventions when I was younger, and I got to meet a lot of the Star Trek crowd. But by the time that Firefly came around, I was no longer doing the convention thing. And Alan Tudyk is someone that I would actually drag myself to the big hotel ballroom to meet.
Yeah, me too. I would definitely want to meet him. I think he's definitely a guy that I would want to have a beer with for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Hmm.
I feel like he hasn't had the success of some of the other people from Firefly, and that's sort of a shame. But yeah, funny guy. All right, well, we do have a kind of a quote from our what do they call it now? Posts.
Yeah, the post. It's no longer the community tab on YouTube. It is post tab.
Yes. Um, so the quote that I wanted to delve into has now escaped from my screen. Where the heck is it? Oh, the discussion about playing Western music on the Shakuhachi. And I know we joked a little bit about, you did forbidden tunes.
Yep.
Um, um, I think that there there are some examples of people using shakuhachi in Western music. Most like notably Peter Gabriel is a big fan of the shakuhachi.
Sure.
But unfortunately, when it was time to put it on an album, they weren't using actual shakuhachi. They were using like MIDI samples
Sure.
of the shakuhachi. And I was just kind of curious, like your thoughts on, uh, you know, how we as a community can kind of convince people that the shakuhachi could be used like live and whole in its real form, as opposed to just sampling it and putting it on a touchpad or a keyboard.
Yeah. Well, the biggest issue with stuff like that is that the instrument is hard to play. It's not an easy one to just pick up and you can just make a really decent sound on it. Even just developing a really good tone on the instrument takes a long time, and I think that's the issue with the culture that we've created, where it is just it's immediacy, right? And
Yeah.
that's immediacy and comfort are the two greatest sins of our modern era. And for myself, we're looking into buying property and getting out to Nashville to do some of that work, because you know it is too often now that what has happened is there are so many of these GAN networks and AI networks that are pairing up with these sample libraries that can create pretty convincing sounds on both the movie front for film scores as well as their albums that whatever music they're making, whether it be pop, rap, hard rock, or whatever. And they're getting away with it where actually some of them are getting so good that it's pretty convincing. And especially when it comes to like it's only going to be like one sound. Well, if this sound is what is sampled, right? Just this little thing here, or the inverse, like that already goes a long way into a film score, or even into a an album track that you're making, and you really don't need other to hire a person to do that or to have a live instrumentalist do it. And most of the time they don't want to budget it or pay for it because it's expensive. It's not just
Sure.
like, so for example, like let's say if someone hires me, which they have, and it's not just they have to pay my fee, right? So the fee I've already have to pay for by an hourly rate, which is we negotiate upon whatever. Then the next thing they have to pay for is the studio time. And if they own their own studio, well, then they had to pay for all the things inside the studio, and they have to pay for upkeep, they have to pay for electricity, they have to pay for this thing and that thing. So any time that they call someone in to use that studio, there are all these fees that associate with it. So just getting in one musician can be thousands of dollars. Not to mention,
Sure.
especially if the person has to travel.
Well, if the guy's a union musician too.
Oh yeah. I am not unionized, so please hire me. Thank you.
I don't think that Shakuhachi Local 205 is going to come knock on your door.
No.
Well, it irritates me to no end. The videos that in between videos, I get ads on YouTube all the time for like, you want to make your own beats, but you don't know chords? Here's the chord pack that you need. And I'm like, how about instead you just take a few minutes and learn some chords, you freaking loser?
Yeah.
I'm like, if you're playing keyboards, learn some freaking chords. Like, it just drives me crazy. Having small children who are like, my son is 10 and he's really into gaming, and we have to like kind of limit his ability on the internet because he gets a new game and he'll try the puzzle or try to beat the boss a couple times, and then he goes, Dad, I need to go to Google and look up how to beat this. And I'm like, no, you lazy little punk. Beat it the same way that I beat video games, with sweat and frustration and throwing the controller. That's how I beat the boss. Stop cheating. And that immediacy you were talking about is definitely definitely apparent with young musicians. There's a lot of young musicians who are just like, I'm not going to spend 10 years mastering this. I'm going to go and get a patch and, use somebody else's mastery. Very depressing.
So here's another question here, which is, can you recommend published artists that feature the shakuhachi in a non-Japanese style as demonstrated of its flexibility? Yeah, you're talking to one. You can go to my CD 2020 Bamboo. It's all contemporary music for shakuhachi. Kohachiro Miyata also does those. Has done a lot of contemporary works for shakuhachi. Riley Lee. You can also listen to Yamamoto Hozan. You can listen to let's see, Teruhisa Fukuda does a lot of contemporary music. Rodrigo Rodriguez does a lot of contemporary music and stuff outside of that pop stuff. You can listen to Fujiwara Dozan, who does lots of concertos and new music, jazz, pop. You can also listen to, like the Bamboo Flute Orchestra. Those are 5 students of Fujiwara Dozan. You can also listen to Daisuke Kaminaga. Let's see, who else?
Wagaki Band.
Yeah,
amazing.
Wagaki Band, stuff like that. And then of course John Kaizan Neptune would be another one who was mentioned as well, that I think would be good.
There are some people like in the jazz world. Zach Zinger is quite popular. Although he's a saxophone player, and it definitely shows in his shakuhachi playing. he has a kind of a saxophone approach to the shakuhachi, but it's very, very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, if you really want to go back, Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer, the
Mm-hmm.
album had Shakuhachi samples on it, and he kind of, if I understand correctly, Peter Gabriel himself like fiddled around with the shakuhachi and tried to learn it, and then realized that as a professional musician he did not have time to take on the task of becoming a shakuhachi player, and that's how he ended up with the samples rather than live instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's out there, and there's a lot of sort of attempts to do standards. Like there's the classic Take Five performance. Was that Yamamoto Hozan?
Yep.
Yeah, that's sort of a classic example of taking a jazz standard and trying to do it on shakuhachi. And you hear the same thing a little bit in the classical world as well. Just shakuhachi players taking on violin pieces or taking on flute pieces from the classical canon.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I have to admit, John Coltrane or something like that, kind of daunting on the shakuhachi. A lot of chromatics in there.
Yeah, I look, if you're gonna get that chromatic, then a lot of people just start playing 7-hole flutes. But at some point, when you start to play those sort of genres, you actually get outside of even what shakuhachi is. It starts to sound not like shakuhachi.
Yeah, well, 7-hole flutes, right? That's the third rail of shakuhachi debate.
Yeah, we have enough memes on our channel about that.
We don't want to talk about that. We're
Yeah.
going to upset people. And I think that the shakuhachi sort of development that I'm really interested in, and I always want to mess around with it, is I like the idea of miking a shakuhachi and running it into an amp, and then being able to process it with pedals and all that. And I keep saying that someday when I have the time, I'm going to get like an air reed, a metal shakuhachi, and put a condenser mic on it and add a jack to it and plug it into my pedal board and see what happens.
Hmm.
Just like harmonica, I think you could get a really cool like overdriven sound, but it's definitely not going to. It's not going to sound like shakuhachi. Just like a blues harmonica, played through an amp doesn't really sound like a harmonica anymore. Do some pretty cool stuff with that, though.
Someone says here, let's see, running shakuhachi through it live granular is fun. I bet it is.
I bet.
Dak Guitar says, is the shakuhachi being taught in Japanese conservatories? Yes, it is. There are many,
Yes.
all over. Now, some of the schools, though, like I know some of the professors there, and I asked him, how many students do you guys have? He goes, 0. There's nobody who's taking shakuhachi. So it is really, really dwindling hard in Japan.
That's something that we keep dancing around that issue, and in live streams in the past, we've talked about the fact that it seems like the shakuhachi is maybe more popular outside Japan than it is inside Japan.
Yep. No,
And
for sure.
I wonder, it would be difficult, and this is the sociologist in me speaking, I wonder if there are actual statistics to support that, because as I am fond of saying, the plural of anecdote is not data. So I wonder if there's actual numbers to support that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to talk to someone like Yozan and be like, hey, who do you sell most of your flutes to? Like, most of your flutes going to Americans, going to Westerners, or are they going to Japanese purchasers?
Out of the country. He's more international sales.
That's wild. Living in Japan and playing the shakuhachi, my anecdotal finding is that people are like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like, Japanese people are like, wow. Japanese people even say, what is that? When I'm playing outside.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's just because of the way is that because of the way I play, Sensei?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questionable things.
No, I think that it is an interesting thing that we're, the push in the shakuhachi world seems to be coming from the West at the moment. It's a little sad to live here and have the only people who really will have shakuhachi stories when they talk to me are people that are in their 70s. And they're like, oh, my father used to play, or my brother used to play.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
I don't know.
and that's honestly a lot of the stuff that that I I get to hear. Like even like when we were coming back from the airport, we was talking to our cab driver, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, my dad used to play shakuhachi and whatever." And stuff like that. I was like, "Oh, so what about you?" He's like, no, I have no interest in that at all."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, incidentally, when I lived in Vietnam, I talked to people in Vietnam who played the traditional flutes of Vietnam, and they report kind of the same thing that the flute players that would come to the festivals to play were all guys in their 60s and 70s, and there was no younger flute player coming along to take that job. And they were kind of lamenting the fact that their cultural flutes were dying out within the country. So maybe there's just a migration away from these traditional woodwinds that's sort of sad.
If shakuhachi is to survive, it's going to be outside of Japan easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think you could say that about any instrument. I mean, if the guitar had stayed, in its Italian and Spanish roots, it would be dead by now, right?
Mm.
It what made the guitar succeed was that it became a universal or worldwide instrument, and I think the shakuhachi kind of needs that push as well. We need to become an instrument that's played everywhere.
Absolutely. So that being said, if you haven't liked this video and you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, join the membership, learn shakuhachi for yourself, and get all your friends to join and play along with you. Because if you love shakuhachi and you like shakuhachi, the whole entire mission of this channel and what we do is we make shakuhachi approachable and digestible for anybody who wants to learn it, and we give that as an option for like a path for people to learn. In addition, with having the Discord, we have a community that is unbelievably supportive. Honestly, the amount of wholesomeness that is in the Discord is so awesome. There's so few. Like we were talking about this on another live stream like 10 weeks ago or something like that. Like you don't find online communities that are that wholesome.
Super nice. The only place I can think of on the internet that is more warm and fuzzy than our Discord is actual pictures of puppies and kittens. It's the nicest people in the world on our Discord. No one is nasty, and it's very, very kind.
I honestly don't even think we've had one nasty comment or one nasty post in there.
No, mostly the only time we've ever really had to swing the mod hammer was just on things that got weird. They weren't mean. They were just super odd, and we were kind of like, "Are you okay?" That's about it.
I mean, we had to stop you from posting all those feet pics with your shakuhachi. That was weird.
You know what? There's a market for that, and I think you're being very unfair. Actually, speaking of off-topic things, one last thing we should do here is throw this out to the community. Sensei is trying to grow out his beard.
Oh yes.
And he needs some comments and some love on it. And I personally, as a beardsman myself, I think it looks great. And I think that every man should at some point in their life embrace the beard. You are an adult member of your species, and this is a classic part of your secondary sexual characteristics exploring themselves, expressing themselves. So let it grow. But I think it looks really good. And so if you have comments on Sensei trying to rep the Tony Stark look, please feel free. Jump on Discord. Let us know.
And if you hate it, let me know too. As I can take it. I can take the beating.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to get Sensei to grow it out just so that he doesn't look like the snot-nosed kid anymore. Right? It makes him look like a grown man.
It is there's a lot of men in Japan, and a lot of men that I know that are getting laser hair removal on their face, and so that they just never. Oh yeah, first off, ow, and then two. Well, what if you change your mind and you actually do want to have a beard at some point? Well, then it's just you'll never have it. So
I had laser removal done on a tattoo, and it hurts an order of magnitude more than getting the tattoo.
Oh yeah.
And if you could imagine someone stretching a rubber band across the flesh of your arm or the flesh of your face, and then just repeatedly snapping it, snap, 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 snap. That's what it feels like to have laser on your skin.
Ouch.
So, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, comment on Sensei's beard, and yeah, like, subscribe, join, share, all that stuff.
We have another question here from Bitmax. Does having a beard affect your playing in any way? I've noticed that when you have stubble, playing the flute isn't entirely comfortable. So when the hair actually starts to drip below the lip line, then it can cause like a little bit of issue because the air can start to actually lower the pitch because the airflow is not actually going where you think it's going when you're normally blowing. It will be blowing down and in more, and that lowers the pitch of the instrument. So one of the things that we had our in-house producer do is using beard wax and pulling the beard off to the side like this, and it raised up his pitch like 10 to 15 cents. But so in general, having a beard shouldn't affect your playing. Here, if it gets a little bit thicker, then yeah, but honestly, you'll just adjust to that, and you'll fix it over by just becoming more used to it. The bigger change that's going to happen when you're playing like with beard versus no beard is having the beard and then shaving it all off and then trying to play. That is going to be that's a really, really big shift, and that's going to be tough. Even for something like this that's gone to this point, if I shaved all this off, it would be like a very weird day of playing shakuhachi before, I can get back onto it.
Yeah, with beards, there's an old saying about haircuts for men. You know what the difference is between a good haircut and a bad haircut?
What?
2 weeks. Okay? And with the beard, it's true, but it's a longer time period. The difference between the discomfort of a beard and having a nice, comfortable beard is about a month. If you've got stubble that's bugging you and it's itchy, or like the flute is irritating your chin or whatever, you just got to be patient. Once you get to a certain length, you won't even notice it anymore. And a lot of guys give up. I think that's what stops a lot of people from having the beards. They get it just too itchy and too irritated.
Yeah, and the thing is,
if you have questions, you can hit me up. I have a frankly ridiculously large beard and have had one for years and years and years. So if you have questions about how to get past those things, feel free. Hit me up on Discord, and I'll share my wisdom with you.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for watching this live stream. Thank you for all of your questions and activity. Don't forget that you can like this video, subscribe to this video, and then join our membership. We give away stuff all the time, especially flutes. And we will be giving out more flutes this year, so join the membership. It's worthwhile to have all of the content that's there for learning shakuhachi. There's tips, there's guest masters, and please also stay up to date because we are going to be releasing a new Suizen course on my website, taidyushakuhachi.com. That's going to be by a guy who's been living in Japan for more than 20 years. He's an ordained monk of Jodoshu. He's been a lifelong practitioner of Zen, and also a long time practitioner of shakuhachi as well. So that Suizen course will be coming up as well. And so keep all that in mind. Until next time, row for 10, and I will see you at the next live